Number 1. Memory. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced some sort of amnesia of any sort, but it can be a vastly terrifying thing. I had it once. All the reading that I had done on amnesia growing up made me believe that people with lost memories would always be happier when the memories came back to them. But in a way, if the experience is terrifying enough, getting the memory back can be even scarier than experiencing it for the first time. So this story sort of takes place in 2 parts, because at one point, I didn't really remember what happened. The first part I remember very clearly. I lived by myself at the time. It was a small, 1-bedroom house in a place called Wonder Lake. I liked it because it was so small. It was not in a neighborhood or subdivision. It was surrounded by a ton of trees. The next house over wasn't very far. It was maybe the equivalent of a city block away from me. I mean, I could call out to my neighbors when we were both mowing the lawn or doing something like that. He would occasionally wave to me when I was mowing. And it was nice because that was far enough away from each other that I could play loud music or something and not really disturb him. The area became very beautiful as the fall came on, and then when winter followed. I had a fun time decorating the house up for Halloween, and I actually got some kids coming by to get candy that year. And as beautiful it was in the fall, I was really looking forward to seeing what sort of winter wonderland would come about when it began snowing. The first couple of snows, like usual, in this part of the country, were nothing really to write home about. It really wasn't until January that we really began to experience actual heavy snowfall. The snow was falling really hard one night. From what I heard, it was supposed to be several feet of snow that evening. But I didn't mind. I had nowhere to be, and I thought I would just enjoy the snow. Now, I was having a nice night, and the important thing to note is that I was not drinking or doing drugs of any kind. I was just having a regular and nice evening and nothing else. I was drinking a hot cocoa. And suddenly, everything was just black. And that is the best way I can describe it. I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, everything was black for a moment. When I came to, I had no idea why I was at first. It was still dark, but it was not a nothingness-like void like I had been in before. I was confused for a few moments and tried to figure out why I was where I was. I tried to remember back to what the last thing I remembered was, and it was me recalling what happened that I then remembered everything that happened after everything went black. I would learn later that there was some sort of psychological explanation for what happened to me. The memory progressed in my mind, coming back to me but playing like a movie in my head. I was sitting in the living room, looking at the backsliding glass doors. I had the lights turned out while I was drinking tea and watching the snow fall down because it was so beautiful out there. And I got up and made my way back into the kitchen to make myself another cup of tea. And when I was done, I walked back and sat down in my chair once again and began looking out the doors. Now I was still watching with the living room lights off. There was a light in the backyard that shined behind the snow. I hadn't been sitting there for too long before I noticed something was off. The sliding glass door was slightly open. Apprehensively, I got up and went over to the doors. It wasn't open that much, but it was slightly unlatched. I knew that I hadn't left it that way, although it seemed like it wasn't likely that somebody was actually in my house. I had to go check it out. So I got up and checked throughout the house. Remember how I mentioned it was a small house? There was 1 bedroom on the ground floor, and a loft and a closet up the stairs. The kitchen was on the side of the house, which is how someone could have gotten into the house without me noticing. But I didn't really think that someone was in my house. This was like any situation where you think you might have someone in your house or in your apartment, you are really sure that no one is there, but you still feel like you have to check to be sure. And I went walking over towards the stairs to check up on the loft, and I felt a strong shock go through my body as I heard a noise up in the loft. I was hoping that it was an animal, but it was a creaking noise that sounded like someone walking. I could see behind the steps a foot land on the first top step, and that was when I knew someone was in my house. It was just a terrifying feeling that I couldn't describe. I reacted to it with a bit of spontaneous yell, and immediately wished that I hadn't. The person on the stairs quickly came down the stairs, and I noticed that he was a lot bigger than me, and I wasn't sure what to do. I tried to run into the bedroom, but he got to me before I could close the door. There was a struggle against the guy, and I guess at the time that I thought it was possible that I might be in real trouble. I tried fighting back, but I have no problem admitting that I just didn't have the strength to do that. He shoved me in the closet and told me if I knew what was best for me, I wouldn't come out until he was gone. And after that, I couldn't tell how long I had been in that closet. My mind must have temporarily blacked some of that out. I guess it was so traumatic that my brain shut down the memory of it. It only came back to me when I made an effort to bring it back. I was still scared and a little bit worried. I didn't really know how much time had passed. I thought I remembered everything, but how could I know for sure? After a while, I decided I should get up and go check around the house. It was hard getting to stand up at first, but I was able to do it without too much swaying. I crept quietly out of the closet, and then tried to make my way through the house. It was so nerve-wracking leaving the bedroom and looking toward the back door. The door was closed, and there were things missing from my apartment. Having things missing should have made me confident that the intruder had left, but I was still terrified, looking in the kitchen. And the worst part was going up those stairs and looking in the loft. I guess most people might be wondering why I didn't just call the police, but I just didn't think about it in the moment. It seems more likely for that thought to occur when you're on the outside. But no one was in the loft. I then went and called the police. Nothing was seriously wrong with me, which I am thankful for, and my insurance covered the missing items. But the experience took a lot longer to get over. Number 2. Exit. I was waiting to get off work one evening when it started snowing outside. I hadn't been expecting that because I don't normally check the weather. I just look outside and see what I'm supposed to see. But unfortunately for me, I didn't get off work until very late that night. It was very late when I finally got off work. I closed up the store, locked it, went out to my car. I had to clean all the snow off my car, which was not something I liked doing. You just get all cold and wet when you have to do that. Driving home was really, really hard. It was still snowing very hard. Not only that, but the plows had not really done the best job clearing the streets either. I had to drive very slowly and was still slipping and sliding too much. It took me forever to get to the freeway, and even then it really wasn't any better. The only thing then I could hope for was getting home as safe as possible. I really couldn't explain what began happening, though, to my own car. It began acting up. Smoke coming in through the vents, and the transmission began slipping. I was too scared to pull over on the freeway because there was barely room for a car on the side of the road, so I pulled off into an exit that I had never pulled off on before. I had no idea where the exit led. There weren't any gas stations or other businesses right off the exit. It looked like it was just trees and stuff that were there, but I pulled down the road anyway, and I was looking for something. I pulled off on the side of the road by a mailbox and a driveway. I then turned off my car and tried to figure out what was going on. I had no idea what had happened, so I also had no idea how to fix it. I got my phone out and was trying to call AAA to get them to come there to help. Although I had their service, I had never used it before. While I was sitting there in the car, suddenly there was some light behind me. I didn't think about it much at first, trying to pay attention to my phone. But when the bright light began making it hard to see, I looked up to change the rearview mirror's position, and when I did, I saw the car right behind me. And it was right behind me, not completely on the road. I didn't have time to react. The next thing I knew, the vehicle slammed into me from behind. The car hit me from behind really hard and really fast. My car flew forward, right through the mailbox that was in front of me, and down into the ditch in between the road and the yard of the house. And it flew forward far, with the other car still sliding on the snowy road, coming right after me. The car turned over on its side, with the other car nearly on top of it, and it happened so fast and so slow at the same time. When it was over, I was unable to get out of the car, and that was terrifying. Maybe I'd seen just way too many movies, and expected a chance that the car would explode, but I was feeling it at the time. I kept trying to find a way to get out, but the whole thing was too difficult. It didn't take long until I heard sirens coming. Then, there were a few people out by the cars, asking me and the other driver if we were all right. I assumed they were the people from the house, and I was later confirmed to be correct. My leg was jammed under the steering wheel, and I was terrified as they were trying to cut open the cars to get us out of both cars. Waiting, not knowing how damaged I was, feeling the accident happen over and over again. It was all too terrifying. Fortunately, they were able to get us out, both of us, and we had minor injuries. But we both were rushed to the hospital. The road on the exit had not been plowed at all, and the car behind me had rear-wheel drive, and that's one of the reasons why it slipped so badly on the ice. Both of us were lucky that something worse didn't happen. Number 3, ride home. I was working at the first really good job that I had ever had. After going and taking courses in community college, I got certified as a mechanic and got a great job working in a private garage. It was in an average-sized city in the north, so we always had a lot of good business. It was my first real good job after high school, and much better than the normal fast food and retail things that I had been doing for a while. So having a good job, I tried to get a lot of the other things in life that I wanted in place. I rented a really nice apartment in the city. I got myself a nice car. And I decided I was going to start looking around for a relationship too. I had never really had a serious one before, but after feeling like the rest of my life was in order, I think that I was finally ready for it. This was a little while back, and even though I was living in the city, I didn't have a lot of experience meeting people, so I used the dating site in order to find someone, and for the most part, I really hated those things. I understand, people misrepresenting themselves to some degree. You might use an older picture of yourself, or lie a little bit about an inch or two here or there, but when you lie about your intentions, this is the one thing that really irritated me the most. I couldn't stand when people did that, telling me they were looking for a serious relationship, and all they were really doing was trying to find a sexy hookup. And when I met Brian, it is the sort of thing I was expecting it to be. He was very youngish looking, very cute, and dressed very nicely. He had a good job. The only thing that was difficult was that he lived about 2 hours away from me. That isn't the most ideal thing for a relationship, but I hadn't met anybody in my city that was serious about it, and he seemed to be. I don't really want to get too in-depth into our relationship. It's sort of important as to what happened, so I had to give you an idea. We had a great time talking on the phone together to each other for about a month. I think I was a lot more eager to meet him than he was to meet me. But that was just positive for me. I mean, it meant it seemed like he absolutely was interested in more than just sex. Brian and I eventually met, and I can tell you that we had a wonderful first date together. I drove down to his place and he took me out to one of his favorite restaurants. We then went back to his apartment and cuddled a little bit, but he didn't try to take it any further than that. I had to be back home by a certain period of time, so we didn't have an awful lot of time to spend together on that first date. When I arrived home, I called him, and we talked for another hour or so. This was on Saturday night. We agreed that we would chat again on Wednesday night, after I'd gotten home from work. I was so really looking forward to Wednesday coming, so that we could talk on the phone. Christmas was coming up soon, and the garage was having a dinner. When we talked the day we met, I invited him to come to the dinner with me, and he told me that he would have an answer for me when we talked on the phone on Wednesday. The next few days at work went by really slowly. When Wednesday came along, I was really excited. I just had a really good feeling, that this could be the time that it all worked out. A few hours before we closed up, the temperature dropped dramatically and tons of dark clouds moved in. The wind picked up, and by mid-afternoon it was howling at what had to be 20 miles per hour. I knew it was going to be an intense winter night, and I was so wanting to get home, get a glass of hot chocolate, and wait for my call. The snow began falling about 3 hours before I got off work. My boss had some extra work that night, and normally I was the first person to stay late and do that, but not only because of the impending phone call, but the snow had been falling very heavily. I declined, and left for home right after work. It was bad right away. It was already dark out, of course. It had been for a couple of hours. I had to get on the interstate to get home, and had a feeling, and I was right, that it would be very crowded. The snow was falling heavily, and it was really affecting visibility. The direction I was going was sort of reverse rush hour, though. The cars going the opposite way of me were the ones with the most traffic, eager to get home. I remember driving quickly through on the on-ramp, confident my all-wheel drive vehicle would be completely okay with it. When I got to the top of the ramp, that is where things took a turn I hadn't seen coming. Even when I think about it now, I cringe. My tires hit some black ice, and because I was going so fast, my truck started spinning out of control. It spun into the interstate, which was full of cars, and that was when it happened. A huge semi-truck was coming right at me. You can't imagine what it was. I mean, this huge vehicle was coming at me, and to make matters worse, the semi slid on the ice too. It came flying at me and T-boned my vehicle. I thought about Brian, the boy I was trying to get home to talk to, and everything became non-existent. But not before I saw it again, the semi jackknifing and coming straight at me, and I thought that I was going to die. And I thought I was dead. Everything was black and non-existent. It was horrid. It is a feeling that I have heard other people talk about but can never really explain. It was like existing in a pool of blackness, but also not existing. There are some other moments that don't make sense. I was eventually able to see again, but not able to understand what was going on. I didn't know who I even was. It was terrifying, and all came back to me really slowly over a long period of time. I had some bad head injuries, and once my memory and personality began coming back, I began to get better. But it still took a long time to happen, and even after rehabbing, it took a long time before I could ever drive again. I've heard people tell me that they can relive an accident over and over again, and yeah, that happened to me. Getting behind the wheel was the most terrifying thing I ever did, and it took me several years to get through that. Fortunately, though, I have Brian. He was there for me throughout the entire thing, and he is still with me now. That helped to take away a lot of the horror from my accident and my recovery. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. Now, normally I'm not as quiet as I've been over the past couple weeks, so I wanted to explain that to everybody. It's been my goal to sort of set up a sort of schedule, so you can expect to know when my videos will be coming out, but also because all of my stories are original, I had to get myself a backlog of stories in order to be able to do this. I now have those, so you'll be seeing more content every week from me. I just want to let you all know that, and thank you for sticking with me. I have the best subscribers that anybody could love to have. For now though, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.